Welcome to Tax File Special. I am your host, Lauri Bala Hassan. On this special edition of Tax File, we'll engage with leading voices shaping Nigeria's economic and tax future. In the course of the program, we will join Arabirin Aderonke as she sits down for an exclusive and insightful interview with one of the nation's distinguished industry leaders. But first, the news. And now, the news. In a move signaling Nigeria's renewed drive for international tax cooperation, the Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS, hosted a high-level delegation from the Kingdom of Netherlands as both countries begin renegotiation of their double taxation agreement. Hussaina Ibrahim has the report.
The meeting held at the Revenue House in Abuja marks the first official tax treaty renegotiation following the signing of the Nigerian tax reform bills into law by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu on June 26, 2025. Executive Chairman of the FIRS, Dr. Zak Adedeji, described the talks as timely and strategic, considering global and domestic tax reforms currently underway. The talks aim to modernize the current treaty, removing outdated provisions and aligning it with Nigeria's new tax reforms, global standards, and anti-base erosion and profit-shifting BEPS measures. As Nigeria ushers in a new era of tax administration, this engagement with the Netherlands could set the tone for future collaborations in strengthening global tax cooperation.
Director General of the National Sports Commission, NSC, Honorable Bukola Olokbade, has publicly commended the Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS, leadership under Dr. Zak Adedeji, describing him as a visionary public servant and committed supporter of sports development in Nigeria. He praised FIRS's active role in key sporting events, notably its partnership in the CAA Under-18, Under-20 African Athletics Championships, which took place in Abeokuta, Ogun State. Evelyn Shija has the reports.
Speaking during the visit to FIRS headquarters in Abuja, Olokbade highlighted the growing intersection between effective tax administration and national growth strategies. He emphasized that FIRS's investment in sports, particularly through public-private partnerships under President Tinubu's Renewed Hope agenda, is a positive indicator of this alignment. According to Olokbade, sports and taxation can work hand in hand to build a stronger, healthier, and more united Nigeria as we work to stimulate Nigeria's sports economy.
Meanwhile, the Technical Subcommittee of the Federal Executive Council Initiative on Domestic Sales of Crude Oil and Refined Products in Naira, ICONS, met recently to review progress on the Crude for Naira initiative. Reaffirming stronger coordination between regulators and industry operators, the meeting marks another step in advancing Nigeria's strategy to deepen local transactions in the energy sector using the Naira. Ejura Etu Okpanachi has the reports.
Key outcomes of the meeting include the adoption of monthly volume projections to enhance planning stability, continued stakeholder education through the one-stop-shop platform, and reinforced government alignment aimed at building a self-sustaining domestic energy market. These efforts are expected to strengthen Nigeria's fiscal resilience and support broader structural economic reforms. Present at the meeting were the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Mr. Wale Edun, who chairs the ICONS Committee, the Executive Chairman of the FIRS and Chairman of the Technical Subcommittee, Mr. Zak Adedeji, alongside senior officials from the NNPC, Dangote and NNPC refineries, NMDPRA, NUPRC, NPA, and the Central Bank of Nigeria.
And that wraps up the news segment. Now, let's join Arabirin Aderonke for an exclusive conversation with our distinguished guests.
Welcome back to Tax File Special. This is our exclusive interview segment where we bring you insights from the experts, Shaping Tax Policy and Administration in Nigeria. And today we have a very special guest, the Executive Chairman, Federal Capital Territory Internal Revenue Service, FCT-IRS, Mr. Michael Ango. Get ready for an enlightening conversation packed with expert perspectives on tax administration, compliance, and policy direction. Let's dive in. And thank you for having us today.
And it's a pleasure to be on your show today.
Thank you very much. So, going straight to the question, how do you assess the resilience and adaptability of the new tax laws? And are there provisions for future amendments or revisions?
Well, first you must look at the entire process that led to the recent passage of the new tax laws. The last time we had a significant review of our tax laws in Nigeria was back in 2007, when we had the amendments to the Companies Income Tax Act, the Value Added Tax Act, and then of course the introduction then of the FIRS Establishment Act. So it's been about a decade since we had a holistic review of our tax laws. In between, we'd had some reviews with the Finance Act from 2019 to 2022, I believe. So these particular reforms were quite, they were necessary. Also, the process whereby the president set up the Presidential Reforms Committee, including persons from the public sector, the private sector, industry, and them headed by a thoroughbred professional. So I think the whole essence of the reforms were to ensure that these reforms were going to be not just holistic, but, to use your word, resilient, in the sense that we needed to pass laws that will be contemporary and that will also stand the test of time. So, for example, if you look at the issues around income threshold, for example, these are things that will change with time, because the economy is dynamic and companies grow and companies, status of companies might change. So things around income threshold, tax rates, those are things that cannot be static or fixed. So there will always be need over time to kind of look at those things. But in total, I think the tax laws, what we've seen so far, the provisions of these laws, I think they will stand the test of time. We are fully in support of the reforms. I was a member of the Presidential Committee, and as the head of the FCT Internal Revenue Service, we believe that overall the reforms will have a positive impact on the Nigerian tax system, and we must commend, the president and every other person who was involved in this entire process and getting the laws passed and enacted.
Okay, so looking at the tax laws, and I would also want to commend your committee for doing a very thorough job, looking at the fact that it's, I saw the bill myself and it's a whole lot. It's a whole lot. First of all, congratulations for that. Do you think Nigerians are set? Do you think they are ready to accept the tax laws? Looking at the content of the tax laws, do you think Nigerians will be happy to accept it?
Absolutely. Again, you have to go back to the process. It was a very, very thorough one. There was a lot of consensus building. You remember at a point in time, there were some issues with states, etc. The committee and then, of course, the chairman of the FIRS then saw the governors forum. They sat down, issues around, for example, VAT increment. So there was a lot of give and take. I think that, again, whenever you pass a law, what is important is to take feedback from the persons who are going to be impacted by the law. And I believe that the majority of Nigerians were carried along. Like I said, the composition of the committee itself included persons from industry, from professional bodies, from the academia, even students. So there was a broad-based consensus in terms of what needed to be in the law. And then even when the laws were being passed, the National Assembly took its time. The committees of the Senate and the House of Reps, this whole process was not a rushed one. If you recall, the committee came into being in July 2023, and then we had the laws finally signed into law in July 2025. So about a 2-year period. So it tells you that there was a rigorous process. So I think that Nigerians will be happy. Things around VAT, for example, there was a lot of debate as to whether the VAT rate should be increased or not. Government in its wisdom decided to hold the VAT rates. And I think overall, if you look at it, if you look at areas like the personal income tax amendments, there's been a lot of giving back to the, to citizens. The income threshold in the Personal Income Tax Act has been increased. So now, what is exempted is more significant than what it was before and all of that. So I think overall, majority of Nigerians will be happy with the laws as they are. Of course, for higher income earners, for example, for PIT, they will pay more, but I think that is how progressive societies develop. The more you earn, I think the more you should pay.
So in what ways do the new tax laws align with global tax practices and standards? And are there any specific international law frameworks or guidelines that Nigeria has done inspiration from? And it's so good to know that you're also a member of the committee that worked on the tax bill, now the law.
So I think the most significant thing that we've done that aligns with global best practice is the creation of the Nigerian Revenue Service. Previously, what we had? Yes, we had the FIRS, but in terms of what it did and its coverage, it was quite limited. Now, what we've done is to create an agency that essentially responsible for collecting all government revenues, and that aligns with global best practice because it's one government, it's one federal government. You can't have different agencies of government all collecting revenue, which is going to go into the same purse. So I think for purposes of seamless collection of taxes, reporting, transparency, what has been done is to collapse, the collecting responsibilities in the system into the NRS, which is not to say that all these other agencies are not going to still continue to do their work. Nigerian Customs will continue to do its work, NIMASA, MPC, MPA will all continue to do their work. But in terms of the revenues due to the federal government or to the federation, this will be collected centrally by the FIRS and reported, of course, to FAC, etc. So I think that is one of the major issues that was addressed in terms of global best practice, the harmonization of tax laws. In fact, the whole idea of having a Nigerian Tax Administration Act and then a Nigerian Tax Act, so the whole idea is that if you have several tax laws, you have different provisions, for example, enforcement, you have different provisions for appeals. But now what we've done is to bring everything down, whether it is companies income tax, whether it is VAT, whether it is the hydrocarbon tax, etc. It's all under one legislation. So the appeal procedure, administration, enforcement and all of that. So I think it also helps for clarity. So every taxpayer knows what is expected, not that you get one. In fact, so what we used to have in the past, companies that had CIT obligations and also had petroleum profit tax or hydrocarbon tax obligations would have different reporting timelines, different appeal procedures and all of that. All of this now has been, will I say, harmonized and put into one single legislation.
So are we looking at eradicating the double taxation agreement? So is that what you're trying to do?
No, we're not going to eradicate our double taxation
agreements.
So
what is the renegotiation going on?
Yeah,
what's it about?
I'm sure that the FIRS is going to look at that, and I believe that the leadership of the FIRS, which is very experienced in this matter, would have to sit down with all the agencies. I'm aware that recently there have been some visits from one or two of our treaty partners. So I know that we're going to have to sit down and look at all those things holistically. Of course, our international obligations will continue to remain. We will, as a responsible sovereign entity, we must continue to discharge our international obligations. But where there have been changes in our local laws that would impact those international obligations, then I believe that the relevant agency, which in this case is the FIRS stroke the Nigerian Revenue Service, will sit down with our treaty partners and other international bodies and then look at how they can renegotiate agreements if these agreements need to be, updated, amended, etc. I'm sure all of this will take place, and that is why you must also commend the president for the wisdom in saying, look, you give a 6-month timeline, so these laws will come into effect in January. So there will be a significant transition period, because imagine what would have happened if you just said everything changes, immediately. There would have been a lot of disruption in the system. So I believe the 6-month implementation timeline is fantastic. It's a very commendable act. I must commend the president for his wisdom in
we also allow other stakeholders to...
Yes, of course, stakeholders to prepare. People have to change systems. People have to even update knowledge, capacity building. Even us as tax authorities, we have to acquaint ourselves with the laws. Then we'll now be able to also go out there and also properly educate the tax-paying public.
Okay, thank you so much. So still on the new tax laws, for low-income earners and small business owners, what mechanisms are in place to track their progress and adjust their tax obligation accordingly and as their revenue grows? while you are ensuring a smooth transition to higher tax brackets?
Well, so if you see one of the innovations in this tax law is the whole idea of the centralized tax identification number. And what that will do essentially is that we're going to have one national database of taxpayers. And then what it will help is that a taxpayer will be known to the system from the get-go. And so whether that taxpayer moves from point A to point B or not, he or she is already captured in the database. He has a unique identifier. So of course, we will have systems in place whereby as incomes change or as income thresholds, if you move from probably one income band to another, the system will be able to capture you and to track your transactions. There's going to be a lot of access to bank data and other third-party sources whereby revenue agencies like the FCTIRS and other state internal revenue services will be able to track. Also, the creation of the Joint Revenue Board now as a standalone entity with its own Establishment Act is a very significant development, because what it now means is that we have a statutory body created with its own enabling act, and which will now serve as the umbrella body for all revenue agencies, including the Nigerian Revenue Service. So I think that there will be a lot of mechanisms. Already we have technology in place, we're improving our systems, and once we have a database with every single taxpayer in Nigeria captured, I believe that all these issues around, how to track taxpayers between jurisdictions or when they change from one income band to the other will be reduced, if not eradicated. And I think the whole idea in these tax bills, as I understand it, is while government has said, okay, we'll lower the tax burden on lower income earners, but we'll also create a mechanism whereby the taxpayer net, everyone is captured in the taxpayer net. So as you move from point A to B, as you do your business, the Nigerian government or each of the revenue agencies that have jurisdiction over what you do will be able to track what you are doing. And over time, I believe that every Nigerian will pay his or her fair share of taxes to help with national development.
So the SMEs should not worry?
No, they don't have anything to worry. If anything, I think these laws have been very favorable to them in terms of, expanding the turnover threshold, and then, of course, the fact that income tax rates were not increased for the Companies Income Tax Act, and also for the personal income tax. What happened was that the income tax bands were expanded. So, you have to have a higher income. You have to be earning a particular income before you begin to pay taxes. Previously, the income threshold was quite low in the tax laws, but now it's been expanded. So I think for the small business owners, they will have they have more leg room now in terms of their tax obligations. But the most important thing is that there has to be a culture.
Yes.
People have to understand the reasons why they pay taxes. They have to understand and imbibe that culture so that as their businesses grow, then they can begin to pay taxes if they've already had that mindset that I'm going to be a taxpayer at some point in time.
All right, thank you so much, sir. That was quite insightful. So what are the key strengths of the new tax laws, and how do you believe they will contribute to Nigeria's economic growth and development, particularly in terms of revenue generation and tax compliance, then voluntary tax compliance?
Like I told you, the major strength of these tax laws is the process. Process is very important. Even if I want to do something positive, but if I adopt a process that is not based on consensus, then there will be resistance. So I think the entire process whereby these laws took a bit of time, there was a lot of consultation, public engagements, public enlightenment, with all sorts of groups that were held, and also, like I said, the rigorous process in the National Assembly. So for me, I think that at the end of the day, once you have done all of that, what you've done is to carry people along. So these tax laws, there will be ownership. People will feel, look, I was a part of this process, so it's incumbent upon me to also help these laws to be successfully implemented. And in terms of national development, one of the most important things in national development is revenue, as you and I know. And so with the onset of the Nigerian Revenue Service, you will begin to see increased revenues accruing to the government of the Federation. They will be properly tracked, properly accounted for, And I think that because of the, centralization of revenue collection, you find that there will be more professionalism in the system now. And I believe that there will be a lot of investment in terms of capacity building for the staff of the Nigerian Revenue Service. And I'm sure that every state will be, because at the end of the day, the revenues that will be collected are going to be shared at FAC anyway. So the more capable the Nigerian Revenue Service is to capture taxpayers, to get everyone into the tax base, and then also to ensure that they collect what is due to the Federation, it will also, the states need to support, because at the end of the day, the revenues are going to be shared at FAC and everybody's going to benefit from increased revenue. So I think that at the end of the day, we'll certainly see a positive uptake for national development. States will have more money to do what they want to do. Federal government will have more money to provide security, infrastructure, healthcare, education. And I'm sure that in a few years to come, we'll look back and think that this was a watershed moment for the country.
Moving forward, with the introduction of the Tax Appeal Tribunal and Office of the Tax Ombuds, how do you anticipate these institutions will enhance taxpayer protection and resolve disputes in a timely manner?
Yes, so the tax appeal tribunals have always existed. They've just been strengthened. But for the ombuds, what is important is that you now have, you see, it's not everyone who wants to go into an adversary type of dispute resolution process with, the tax authorities. So essentially, for those people who don't feel that their disputes have to get to adjudication, you can appeal to the Office of the Ombuds, make your complaint and all, and the Ombuds can then make a ruling. However, if you're not satisfied, you can still go on to the Tax Appeal Tribunal and get your disputes resolved. The whole essence is to also reduce the cost of dispute resolution for the taxpayer, because the taxpayer has his own business that he's running, or he has his own endeavor, and then because he has a dispute with the tax authority, that does not mean he should abandon his business or abandon whatever he's doing and then squarely face, because the tax authorities have all the time and they have all the resources to engage in disputes with taxpayers. In fact, that is part of the entire tax administration process. There would always be disputes. I would say this is your tax liability, you may disagree and say no, this is not my tax liability. But so these are just mechanisms that have been introduced to enhance the resolution process and minimize cost and time for taxpayers. So I think they're a very positive development, particularly the ombuds. It's something that we've seen in other jurisdictions where they have the Office of the Taxpayer Advocate, who is an independent entity that assists to, manage or resolve tax disputes between taxpayers and the revenue authorities without going through a formal adjudication process. Even the tax appeal system is also semi-formal, because what we've tried to do, or what the law has tried to do, is to ensure that you don't have to then have, I don't have to go and hire a lawyer, start doing a formal process and all of that. You can even represent yourself before the tax appeal tribunal. You can just get a tax consultant to represent you. Ultimately, the whole idea is taxpayers need to be catered for. They need to also understand that, look, government does not want to kill their business. Government does not want to tax them into extinction. But it is important that everybody then, of course, does his own bit. And wherever there is a dispute or it might even be just a difference in opinions, the way you interpret the law, then you submit it to, an independent party to review it. And of course, once a ruling is made, then it's expected that everybody will abide by that ruling, and then these disputes can be resolved in the shortest possible time.
Thank you, sir. Indeed, it was a valuable conversation with the Executive Chairman, FCT IRS. We hope you have gained useful insights. A big thank you to our guests for joining us and sharing such valuable insights with all of us. We hope you found the conversation as inspiring as we did. See you next time.
Brings us to the end of this special episode of Tax File. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, I am Lowry Bala Hassan, FIRS, simplifying tax, maximizing revenue.